Welcome to another episode of the Reinsurance Podcast. I am your co-host, Jerad Lee.
And I'm Ben Rose.
Good to see you again, sir.
Today we're joined by a small potted plant.
No guests today, only planty.
Yeah, which is a sign that we are clearly in spring.
Yeah.
Except that it's an artificial plant, but we won't dwell on that.
We use, there's a website called Patch that you can purchase plants from the internet.
Really?
Innovation. But all the plants that they give you have a name. So like we have a little cactus and its name is Spike. But when you buy them, they come with a name, and then they send you emails like, "I'm Spike. I like this much sun." So all of our plants now have a name that they come with, and then we get emails from the plant to tell us how to take care of it. So
this is really funny.
What a world we live in.
You've opened up my mind. This is really interesting. At first I was going to say, you've got to get out, Jerad. I mean, like, what is this? How bad the city is? They have to like import your plants via delivery. It was funny as well because when I heard that story too, it reminded me of something Mark, our ops lead, said to me from his old job. When an old job, I think, when he was running a startup ops around home moving, where you could, order a van that would come and transport all your things. He said, in order to dissuade customers who wanted to transport lots of plants, they would ramp up the price for plants because they did lots of analysis and they worked out that the hardest thing to deliver, the thing that always messed up deliveries, got damaged, ended up in complaints, ended up in time delays or lack of space, was potted plants. Yeah. So for you to say that not only is there a business, or there is a business that's delivering potted plants, but it's one that's successful enough for it to have reached, your highly curated list of suppliers that make it into Jerad's household. Yeah. Well, there we are.
No, it's fun. Well, it's funny. Like that was a strong tangent, a strong opening tangent, but it actually dovetails quite nicely into what we wanted to talk about today, which is a little bit of entrepreneurship. Kind of the idea and the journey that we went on trying to tackle the problems that we were facing as practitioners when we first started Riskbook, now known as Superseed. But it came to mind yesterday. I was actually catching up with someone just after lunch, and they are going on sort of their early founder journey. And it was just a bit of a discussion about how do they think about the problem set, and how should they think about the early challenges their business might face, and how to navigate what the landscape might be. And it aligned a lot with kind of the earliest parts of the thinking that we went through at the very early stages of building this product, the product that we have. And I thought it'd be an interesting one for us to kind of just dive into almost the journey by which you identify things that annoy you and begin to build towards solving it. So from there.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's funny when you think about how do startups get started. We'll use ours as a case study and tell you all about the, from the pain to the quitting our jobs and doing it full time kind of part of the story. But I think everybody at some point is tempted to be an entrepreneur, right? They'll see something that annoys them and be like,
this should be better.
Why are there no extra small jumpers?
Yeah. It's a niche problem.
Yeah, it's raining and there's nobody selling umbrellas around here. There must be a way that I can improve umbrella distribution. These kind of things that you spot in your daily life. But it takes quite a leap and quite a vetting, like a serious vetting process to first appreciate the problem from all its different angles, to work out then why has that problem not already been solved? Is there not, money to be made in solving that problem? Yeah. And then to think about the solution that you're proposing, and because especially with startups is so tightly related to it, are you the person to deliver that solution? Are you the ones who are going to do this? Which is the most kind of personally involving question in some ways as well.
Well, I think those first 2 points, you're spot on, because it begins with identifying a pain point and a problem and spending serious time going, why has this never been solved? Because the answer might be because it actually doesn't make sense to solve it, because the cost of solving it would be so great that the value isn't really there. So even though it's an annoyance, it's not one that's sufficiently annoying to justify a solution, if you will. But before we go into that, the journey cannot start without both of us. So we should do a quick background as to when we met, which is years and years ago now.
2016.
2016?
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. Is that how you describe marathon running?
Yeah, exactly. But I'd been at Aon for a number of years, and I'd been in London for a few, and I was doing some work on the strategy consulting team that they had, and you had just joined that team as well, and we got to working. It was quite a small team at the time, wasn't it? It was like 6 of us or 8 of us.
The only reinsurance strategy consulting team in the world that we knew of.
That we knew, which I think is still the case. I don't see anyone else doing purely reinsurance strategy. We should have known then that the Reinsurance podcast would have spun out of that team.
Indeed.
Quick tangent is coming. We should bring everyone who was in that reinsurance strategy team onto the Reinsurance podcast.
One day.
One down.
Well, all at once.
One forthcoming. No, just over time.
Okay. Not a group episode.
Maybe Reinsurance podcast after dark, where we drink wine and hang out. But yes, we met on that team doing reinsurance strategy. You had just come over from Lloyd's, enthralled with the efficiency of the processes by which you underwrote business.
And it wasn't just that. I think one of the really important takeaways that I would like listeners to get from this conversation is that it was, for us, as much about the failings of the actual user experience, which we can talk, for ages, and we have talked a lot in the past about what it's like being a broker, what it's like being an underwriter, what it's like being a buyer when you don't have the right tools in place to do the job. But I think when it comes to why do you start a startup to actually fix this, is when you see that the existing bodies that maybe could do something about it are either unwilling or unable to do so.
Yeah.
And coming from Lloyd's, I gained a real appreciation in that early stage for actually how limited Lloyd's power is. In a lot of ways. Their power is afforded to them by statute, effectively, a Lloyd's Act that lets them do certain things and not others. Yeah. They constantly have to juggle this huge number of stakeholders on the broking side and on the underwriting side, try and get customers in to this big brand that they've built and work really, really hard to protect. But they're quite limited in terms of big, bold moves that they can make. And when it comes to execution, it's rarely, something that can be done in stealth mode, let's say. Yeah. It's, there's a bit of a reputation for getting things done by committee by committee by committee. That was not a blip in the audio. That was me emphasizing the number of committees involved in almost everything within that very complex market with so many different stakeholders. And I remember when I came over to Aon, and there was a competition that I'd just done as part of the Dive-In Festival around innovation and looking at what could change in the market. And I remember, whilst I think the first half of the presentation I gave at that stage on what needed to change was all about the user experience and saying, why is everybody carrying around these big bundles of paper? Why was I a human photocopier when I was trying to be an underwriter? All these kind of things. The second half of that conversation was about, why is nobody doing anything about this? And looking at it from, we've had some good strategy and corporate strategy conversations on this podcast as well, but why isn't the industry able to collaborate to solve this problem? Why is it not enough of the priority? Where are the incentives misaligned, etc.? And that was a fascinating problem that you and I then tucked into and said, we've got to solve as much the technology problem, but also the governance problem. How do you crack it? Because it's not going to be, as we've seen time and time again, by collaboration. It's going to take an independent firm.
And I think when we first started talking about it, and it bumped into all these similar frustrations I had on the broking side, but the initial angle for both of us kind of by default was like nice to haves. Like all the pains and inefficiencies that I bumped into on the broking teams was just managing these huge placements and complexities and tracking the deal and everything else just with spreadsheets that I'd kind of built up and I'd formatted so that if certain things happened, it would notify me of other things that needed to be done, or, basic things that were clunky and inefficient and not really in the same place. And it's very easy to go, oh, wouldn't it be nice if this really slick app allowed us to track all these things and stay on top of it all in one place. But what happens and what I think needs to be done early in the journey, which we went through, was, right, those things are nice. It would be nice if this just was a bit more efficient and it was more digital. But you have to drill down further into like, what is the truly underlying pain? Because if it's just nice to have, like, but people don't always pay very much for, it's like, oh, it's a bit better, but it has to like be transformatively better. 10x better is kind of the startup mantra of, are you delivering 10x better from what the status quo is? And we began to spend a lot of time leaning into what are the profound pain points that is sort of sticking, that's preventing companies from growing. And as we were doing reinsurance strategy, hearing all this conversation from underwriters around accessing new markets, new geographies, and the challenges they face in trying to do that. As a broker, the challenges of distributing things efficiently and getting deals over the line, and the constraints they have around winning net new deals because they spend so much time administrating the existing deals. And you began to sort of really lean into those specific pain points. And you start with, why hasn't this been done before? When you look at reinsurance placement technology as just a component, we quickly discovered that it had been tried a lot, right? And efforts in London and other places, spending upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars trying to do this. And then you begin to ask, well, why didn't those things work? And only through this process of really challenging it over and over did we begin to kind of break out little things that we thought were true.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, when you think about it, it's not just a technology problem, it's a culture issue as well, it's a investment issue, it's a focus issue. There's so many things that have to be prioritized for these ideas to work. So it brings me actually back to a game we played at the time called Kill the Baby, which is a horrible name for a game. Yeah. It's not a game we're going to be playing on the reinsurance podcast. Can't imagine Cordy making that look good in any way.
No.
But we did basically go through and think, okay, let's say we are able to develop the technology. What are all the ways in which it could struggle to get adoption or get shut down or upset people or interest people too little, etc. And we spent a huge amount of time just going through that process because without that exercise, I think it would have been far too easy to be like, here's a whizzy app, as you said, that doesn't actually solve any problems.
Yeah, and we talked about this in some earlier episodes and conversations, but this is the most important thing I think to do, because you have to be really ruthless with the idea that you have, because the number of people who kind of are very protective of their idea and they don't want anyone to say anything bad about it because it's so fragile. But what happens is you ignore all manner of things that will potentially in future kill the idea. And the term comes from being like hyper protective of your baby, and it's a willingness to sort of throw it to the fire and see what can come out, like what happens there. But yeah, you're right. It was, because there's a technical challenge to solve. Fine, that's easier to do than it has been historically. There's a cultural challenge, and that's harder still, because you have not an unwillingness for the industry to want to change. And I think some earlier innovation efforts have mischaracterized our industry's innovation. I think the industry does want to innovate, but it's looking at innovation in a lot of ways isn't solving genuine pain points, right? It's like, oh, it'd be nice if this was faster. Yeah, the margins are good, and if you save me an hour, like, not really gonna change the game. But you begin to drill into, all right, what are the things that really matter? What are the real constraints people face? What are the real pain points that they have? And what are the limitations that they have on their business as a result of the status quo? And you're drilling into all of those things and trying to solve around that. And then you sort of bring out really valuable solutions. And that's working.
Absolutely. And it's always bigger than just that Wizzy app. I think what we discovered when we went through this exercise was that you had all these users. I don't like calling people users. Users like us. We were users. Mm-hmm. That makes us sound like drug addicts. We were not users.
Here we are in East London with other users on the street.
We were people who were trying to do our jobs and doing it, as you described, very manually, repetitively, and typically in a way that lost the data in a spreadsheet or in a folder somewhere where it could only be reaccessed manually and then maybe copy and pasted somewhere else, or even manually rekeyed somewhere else as well. And I think we started to see that the problem was much bigger in its aggregated form. We had an industry where most of the industry's really useful portfolio insights, information about what your company is doing, if you're a cedent, what's in your portfolio, really. If you're a broker, what deals are you doing? What stage are they at? You're hearing rumors from the floor that it's going to be a close one and as to how many deals get done by 1-1, but do you really know?
Yeah.
Reinsurers, again, the only way you're keeping track of your portfolio is by maintaining a live spreadsheet or tracker that you manually enter into, because you're waiting until long after 1-1 to get all of the documents back from the outsourced team that keys them in for you somewhere else once the contract comes back to you fully bound. So we just found ourselves suffering collectively as an industry from not being digital in a way that wasn't just like, wouldn't it be nice to be on a computer, but much more, no, our data has a lag of sometimes several months as an industry, which is bad for the individuals who are trying to get work done because they miss out on really helpful insights. It means they have to constantly spend their time manually doing repetitive tasks that they could replace with much more valuable uses of their time.
But I think that exercise early in the process continues to sort of emerge as we like hone ideas out further. And one of the things we've seen kind of out the back of that is not only is there this lag in data, which you're exactly right, is months and months oftentimes, is you have this industry that produces a huge amount of really interesting work and really valuable work that, because it's all done in spreadsheets, buried in team drives and desktops and all manner of things, like it's not accessible in the aggregate at all. And a company might have a really, if you look at a global carrier, for example, they might have a really good insight into what's driving growth in a certain geography. And they're like, oh, we should understand that globally, only to realize that no other geography does the data that way. And so it completely falls down because there's nothing that's bringing this all together. There's no sense of structure to any of it, oftentimes. And that's almost a shame in a lot of ways. I think there's so many really, really clever people who are doing a ton of really valuable, interesting work on a per client, per deal basis that then is like, that was done. And they put it away in the box and then they start with the next one, do a huge amount of additional interesting, engaging, fascinating work, put it in the box when it's done, right? Yeah. And is there a way to leave it where it can be looked at again from a higher lens?
It's like when you have impromptu analogy battle.
Yeah, exactly.
It really reminds me of when you go to like a street market or something, where you've got lots and lots of artisan stalls. Somebody. I'm going for the sort of cobbled English street version of a street market rather than a sort of
a cart with wooden wheels going down.
Well, I was going to say rather than a hyper industrial. So here's some shirts that we may or may not have got legitimately.
Okay.
That we now offer you to a discount.
I thought it was because Great Expectations is filming in your hometown right now.
Well, exactly. that is an inspiring factor. But if you picture one of these streets where you've got the person selling homemade jams and conserves. I was going to say, is that a word? Confitures, that's French. And then also next to them a woodworker, I was going to say, but a carpenter, that's what I was looking for. He's made some lovely ornamental furniture or something. And further down the street, there's somebody else selling hot dogs. I don't know.
There's a cobbler.
There's a cobbler on the cobbled street. And then somebody, turns up and says like, oh, how many I was going to say cobbles have you sold? That's a great analogy so far. How many of these pots of jam have you sold? And they're like, oh, no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. What I'll do is when I finally get off the road, I've got this town and 5 more towns to do. On Sunday, I'll sit down and I'll work out how many I've got left, and then I'll think about how many I had before that, and that'll tell me how many I've sold.
Yep.
And I'll count the cash and I'll see if it kind of lines up.
Yeah.
And then I'll know how well I've done.
Yeah.
After the market season is over.
Well, and that's a really good that last element is really good as well, because you're saying you go to 4 or 5 different towns and do this. Was town 3 the best town for you? You don't know. Right.
Unless the whole time you were there, instead of selling, you were there with like a notebook, Oh, hang on, somebody's ordered the strawberry and lime. Oh, popular choice. In fact, from a scan of the 1,000 jars that I've sold, I can see it has been sold more than once.
Yeah. But it's this very, like, information is happening. You're trying to run a business and you're getting the data, but it's late and it's not very granular. And it makes it very hard to be calibrating in real time how to improve. Again, these are extreme analogies. Obviously, the industry isn't in quite this scenario, but there's elements of that will resonate for people who are trying to do corporate strategy, as we've talked about earlier, where we want to know a thing, and you realize you actually don't have any real information to interrogate whether that's a thing we can do or not.
I mean, this potted plant company that we started the episode with, they know which plants you've got in which geographical location, and the weather in that geographical location. They have direct access to you to be able to tell you what to do with that plant and any others that you have in real time, and to say, Jerad, based on, could you measure your plant for us? Or based on benchmarking across all of our people who bought this plant, it should be about 6 centimeters tall. If it's not, it's probably not getting enough light, so you might want to move it a bit closer to the window. Yeah. Send us a picture. Okay, yeah, brilliant. All these insights that they can give you, and daily nudges and so on. Yeah. That if you'd bought that plant from the market, then the only way you could get any more insight on that plant would be to go back to the market if they happen to be there. Yeah, join a queue and wait at the box that sells plants.
Well, and this is kind of aligns with the vision for where companies progress and where they go, right? And it's kind of how we think about it as a business. But if we use the plant company still, pain point 1 you're solving is, I want to have access to a variety of plants. The little local one might have a few, but I don't know if they might not have cactuses or cacti. Is cacti just
both are legitimate? I believe.
I think they yeah. But they might not have the certain one I want, or I live in a world now where I buy everything on the internet, so maybe it's more convenient. So that's pain point 1. But then they begin to learn that actually, after purchasing the plant, I like my plant to survive as a new plant owner. So they give me additional tips and tools. And then as you said, the next step is going, well, if the person wants the plant to survive, we can take in weather data, and we know it's been really dry in the UK, really wet. So we know that these plants are affected this way, and we know that these customers have those plants who may have been affected. Let's nudge them and say, oh, the weather's been really cold recently. Like, if your plant is looking like this because of the cold, like, here's ways to revive them. And I think it's the response to knowing what you're trying to solve for. So when we think about our business, we started with the original pain points, helping people understand and structure their data, helping people get their deals done. But we'll continue just to lean into that exact same thing. And then now we know users are wanting this, we can add something else to give them better clarity and insight. We see them using that additional information that they now have to make other choices. Well, now we can help them to make better strategic choices, help them understand new markets. We can begin to support them more and more. So the vision is just listening very intently to what we're aiming to deliver for a client, and then evolving gradually and naturally towards doing a better job with what they're trying to accomplish.
And it really does affect the deal makers as well, I think, in the sense that if you're, let's say you're a broker, for example, I would presume that you as a broker would have loved to be able to say, right, I'm going to see the underwriter from Swiss Re this afternoon. How much business does the client I'm representing do with them? How much have they done historically? Is that more or less than their peers? How much business do we place with that reinsurer as a broking team? All of that kind of stuff is so useful as an evidence. And then layer upon that, if they're kind of working with their cedent as well, wouldn't it be amazing to know intricate details about their portfolio and have those aggregated to hand? So it's like, oh, actually the book is getting a lot lighter. They've moved limits up and so on here without having to do tons of manual work and go and count all your jars of jam.
Yeah.
I imagine that would have made you a much more effective broker when you're trying to persuade a reinsurer to accept a particular price or to take a certain share of different layers.
Yeah.
But at the moment it's more like, oh, come on, this actually, I don't know what accent that was. That this fella's a nice cedent.
Yeah. Well, and
relationships, which are important, but even more so when you can give them something to trust.
Right. And we've talked about why reinsurance is good before. I think doing this well accelerates the goodness, if you will. So the cedents and the brokers have a better understanding about what they're buying and why, and they buy the correct amount at the best price. And that trickles down to the end customer who benefits from their insurance company having better access to efficient capital. And then it helps the reinsurers assess deals more accurately. And as Harold was saying previously on a different podcast about understanding the risks that they want to take on and helping them align their portfolio. So you begin to build this mechanism whereby you're beginning to cover insurance gaps and provide more access to capital. And all of these things improving because you're making the underlying data and the underlying access to deals and things more efficient. And the knock-on effect of that is significant. And that's where we sort of see it progressing, is helping that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the management angle for why go digital is just an absolute no-brainer, right? In terms of you're looking at your teams at the moment and you ask them, what do you spend 70% of your time on? And they're like, oh, manually playing with spreadsheets. The same for cedents, brokers, and reinsurers. And you say, okay, would my organization be more competitive, more profitable, more likely to win deals, or get the outcomes we want from deals if all of our best people weren't spending 70% of their time manually manipulating data in spreadsheets? I think the answer is always going to be yes. If you can do anything to take that away and unleash them and let them actually go and do their job as well as they could do it.
Yeah.
And not only that, not only free them from all the menial janitorial tasks they're stuck doing at the moment, but actually then give them extra tools, differentiators that other players haven't got, intelligence that brings out the best in their portfolio, the best of their expertise, the best of their analytics, their portfolios that they're working with. That becomes then a real game changer. You're leaner and meaner as a player in this industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and this is where companies are slowly moving towards. I think in the direct-to-consumer space, they've made bigger leaps there. They've found faster, more efficient ways to get access to the end customer and market and sell products digitally and via mobile apps and websites and things. The reinsurance space, it's different. It's more nuanced and more complex. So I don't expect it to do anywhere near sort of the comparison site model or other things. However, there is still that same pursuit of data capture. If all of your customers are now able to purchase insurance from you via your website, it means the consistency and accuracy of data that you have across that book is really, really good. But when you go to the reinsurance level, it's all offline again. It's all sort of the old school model of an agent walking around with paper forms and things. So instead of having the full robust history of that customer just came to your website and they went through this journey and then they bought these products and they, like, instead of having all that data that you can begin to learn and improve on, the reinsurance model is still the model that doesn't have anywhere near that same data. What we think we can deliver is a world by which purchasing reinsurance and underwriting reinsurance begins to have the same data sophistication that insurance companies are getting from their end policyholders as they go through that digital journey. So you're right, that pursuit of digitization is a really important one, and a journey most companies are on now.
Brilliant. And then I've just had a warning that a special time is upon us.
Oh boy, is it Frisk?
It is Frisk time, as you know.
I've been doing really bad with these recently.
Well, and I think it's because I've chosen quite difficult examples.
Well, it was really funny. Logan, one of our colleagues in the U.S., he knew it off the top of. He immediately recognized one of the last ones. So he took me to task for not being aware of that one. So.
I can do you a favor. I can give you an entirely subjective Frisk that
okay.
only I know the answer to.
Okay.
And you just have to guess whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, I was sat at the Lloyd's box, little trainee underwriter, and everybody else had gone to lunch or conferences. I can't remember where they'd gone. So I was monitoring or holding the fort, I think is the expression. And a broker wandered up to me and said, "Any chance you guys are willing to take?" And then he said, or did he? This is the question that you have to solve. He said, "I've got a client who would like to take 300 Ferraris and drive them over the Italian Alps for a week-long adventure. And we're looking for insurance for that client." Did this really happen or not?
So in Lloyd's, all manner of strange things happen. So I wouldn't put anything past. I think anyone who's ever worked at a Lloyd's box could say, I once had insert any absurd potential risk, and that could be feasible and viable. I know specialty motor is a big class in Lloyd's, especially custom and antique cars and vintage vehicles and all this sort of stuff. So it's an area of specialty. I also know that there's a broking strategy for when you're in Lloyd's to just kind of go box to box and see if anyone is interested in this thing. I will say this is a true risk that you had.
It's almost true.
Okay.
I inflated it to make it sound totally absurd.
Yeah. What was the actual...
There were only 30 Ferraris, but
still though.
Yeah, no, this guy came around. He was like, no idea where to place this, but I've got the 30 for this person who wants to take 30 Ferraris for a week and just go racing around the Italian Alps.
And the Admiral.com wasn't gonna
give
them the...
Apparently most regular car insurers were not happy to
of course,
support this trip.
Yeah.
I wonder who the client was. I mean, I was almost tempted to say, it depends who the client is. Can you let me know?
Yeah, exactly. Show me the slip and I'll take a look.
And are they willing to provide an extra car for their insurer to accompany them on this adventure?
Only if their insurer can too join this.
Come with them at all times.
Yeah. To make sure it's safe.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. And did you guys do it?
No. I said no. I was like, nope, we do not do...
Absolutely not.
We don't do... what would it be called? Portfolio, like Ferrari portfolio insurance. I'm trying to make it up, but it'd be luxury car fleet. So I was looking for.
We're gonna
luxury fleet insurance.
Yeah,
it must be a thing.
We're gonna double dip on games this episode.
Oh,
you now, sir, have to price this risk.
Go on then.
So if you said no, but my boss is at lunch and I'm an ambitious young underwriter and I am going to write this, what would have been the process by which you'd said 30 Ferraris, let's say 200 grand a piece? You probably can get the driving history of what would be the thought process by which whilst your acting underwriter is on lunch that you write this risk?
So I think this could be in some ways easier and in some ways more challenging than others, because on one hand, it's car insurance and their cars, and there's the usual risks and the usual classes of insurance. So they'd all end up in the highest insurance category of car if you were trying to work out for each individual car, and then you've got a number of them. So you can work out the probability based on there's 30 of this risk flying around. What's maybe more unique in this scenario is that you would know the route that they're taking pretty much, or the types of roads. So you could potentially overlay that information with accident statistics for that region or for those sets of roads. It's like, okay, they're doing a driving tour of this beautiful road in the Alps. How many fatal accidents or very serious accidents are there on that particular road every year? You've got that, and obviously then the damage to the vehicles is a big issue. In this case, more so than it would be for most cars. So you'd look at the cost of replacing those values of the sum insured. But
do you think there'd be an element of increased exposure so if you just have the one and you're just on a road trip, like you may or may not get an accident, and as you said, you can sort of evaluate the various factors of that. In this scenario, any incident likely
involves more
is
than
times two,
yeah.
a minimum, right? So it's almost you have to take the cost of the exposure and have a multiple of like 2.25 or something to say, if one of them hits something, it's probably another one of them.
Yeah,
and that would.
I guess you have a concentration risk element as well.
Yeah,
that we need to bring in, because it's not just one times several. It's like a accumulation risk.
Yeah,
because they're all going to be within a certain distance.
Yeah, a mudslide does a ton of damage.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, it could even not be then, right? It could be, what's the risk in general that a sleepy lorry driver drifts into the oncoming traffic, and if the oncoming traffic is 12 of the 30 Ferraris, that's a little bit more expensive than if it was one Ferrari every 1,000 cars, as it might normally be. Interesting one.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have taken it. I imagine the sum insured would have been quite huge, though. And you'd want them to have a lot of warranties in there about... you probably want some good claims investigators.
Yeah. Well, you'd probably have it where you'd have this sort of risk, the person risk as well. So you realize that it's a footballer who has this, and you're like, oh, so now too, we have to add on the fact that if he's in an accident, everyone's going to know that that's Ronaldo or something, right? And it's going to add those sort of elements to it, which always elevates the sort of premiums and these types of things. But that was an interesting episode in the end.
Yeah, we covered all sorts of things.
Hopefully the people enjoyed that one. If we'll touch on these things in entrepreneurship and all this sort of stuff more. But stay tuned for the next Frisk Risk and Price That Risk.
Combined. And always involving luxury Italian sports cars.
Yeah. Jason would be proud. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.